Imagine a quiet house at night. The lights are low. The TV hums softly. Outside, the world feels demanding, fast, almost hostile. If you clicked because you've noticed that Gen X rarely leaves home, or because you are Gen X and feel most regulated behind your own walls, this video is exactly what you were looking for. But there's something most people never say out loud. This preference for staying home isn't just comfort, it's a survival adaptation. And it comes with a cost most Gen X never names. People often describe this generation like it's a personality quirk, like it's simply a choice. They're just private, they're set in their ways. But those explanations are too small to capture the pattern. What's really happening sits deeper than habits, deeper than preference. It lives in the nervous system. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Because this isn't about liking home. It's about how the brain learned where safety lives. Imagine growing up in a time where independence wasn't celebrated, it was assumed. You came home to empty houses. You learned early how to manage fear, boredom, and uncertainty without anyone noticing. No messages asking where you were, no emotional check-ins. Just long hours, quiet rooms, responsibility settling in early. At the time, it felt normal. But repetition leaves fingerprints on the brain, and the brain always adapts towards survival. Neuroplasticity explains how this works. The brain rewires itself based on repeated experience. For Gen X, repeated self-reliance strengthened pathways linked to internal regulation. Comfort became something you generated alone, not something you expected from others. Over time, the outside world didn't feel dangerous, it felt demanding. And home became relief, not because it was smaller, but because it asked less of you. But what happens when survival skills start limiting possibility? That's a question few dare to answer. There's a stress system involved too, the HPA axis. Think of it like an internal alarm that learns what stress feels like. Growing up with uncertainty teaches that alarm to stay quietly alert when you're outside and to finally power down when you're inside. So when Gen X stays home, it's not avoidance. It's the nervous system returning to baseline. But here's the quiet cost. When the alarm only rests in one place, everywhere else begins to feel subtly exhausting, even when nothing is wrong, even when life calls. That quiet exhaustion builds tension you don't notice until the outside feels like effort rather than possibility. At first, this adaptation is powerful. It creates resilience, emotional self-sufficiency, the ability to sit alone without unraveling. But the same system that learns how to calm itself also learns when not to open. Safety begins to replace curiosity. This is where cognitive dissonance enters. That internal friction between what society says you should want and what your body actually responds to. You're told connection means constant socializing, but your body feels drained by it. You're told staying home means missing out, but going out feels like work. Instead of fighting that tension, Gen X learned to resolve it internally, pulling back, choosing solitude, trusting the body over the narrative. For a long time, that works, until it quietly narrows life. There's even an evolutionary reason this pattern exists. Early human groups didn't survive because everyone chased novelty. Some stayed close to shelter. Some conserved energy. Some observed patterns and maintained stability. Those people weren't weak, they were essential. Gen X carries echoes of that role. The stabilizers, the observers, the ones who don't need constant stimulation to feel secure. But even evolution has limits, and adaptation has shadows. When safety becomes too localized, the world slowly begins to shrink, not dramatically, quietly. Relationships thin out without conflict. Invitations stop arriving because you stopped expecting them. Needs go unspoken because you learned not to have them. Loneliness doesn't announce itself dramatically. It shows up as numbness. Weeks blend together, life passing through glass. As the feeling of being unneeded grows, you tell yourself you prefer it this way. Comfort can turn into isolation without ever naming itself. Gen X is especially vulnerable here because they're exceptionally good at coping silently. They don't externalize discomfort. They normalize it. They tell themselves, "This is just who I am." And the danger isn't that this is false. The danger is how easily it stops deeper questions from being asked. Beneath that calm competence often sits a quiet grief. The grief of being deeply capable, but rarely seen. Emotionally steady, but not emotionally met. And sometimes that quiet grief sits so close you feel it without knowing its shape.
Here's the psychological twist. This doesn't mean the adaptation failed. It means it succeeded too well. A nervous system built for endurance will always prioritize peace over exposure, familiarity over risk, depth over novelty. The problem isn't staying home. The problem begins when the outside world slowly starts to feel less like a possibility and more like something you've aged out of. When visibility fades, when social life shifts online, when community becomes abstract. Suddenly, the world your nervous system adapted for no longer exists in the same way. The vagus nerve plays a role too. It's part of the system that helps the body feel safe. Over time, it learns patterns. For many in Gen X, calm becomes linked to low stimulation and emotional independence. High stimulation environments don't feel exciting, they feel destabilizing. So the body withdraws automatically, not out of fear, out of memory. And that withdrawal quietly reinforces the pattern. This is why solitude feels different for this generation. It doesn't feel empty. It feels ordered. Silence feels restorative, not awkward. Being alone doesn't mean being lonely, until it quietly does. And when that line is crossed, it often happens without a clear moment to point to. Just a growing sense that life is happening somewhere else, and you're watching it through glass. If this feels uncomfortably accurate, that's not coincidence. It means you're recognizing a pattern, not a flaw. You're seeing how something that once kept you stable may also be keeping you distant. And that recognition isn't an accusation, it's awareness. Awareness doesn't demand change, it simply creates choice. Even in the small act of noticing how you react to a sudden interruption or how your body feels in a crowded room. Think back to the quiet house at night, the same one from the beginning. The lights low, the hum of the TV, the calm settling into your body. That calm is real. It's earned. It protected you when nothing else did. But calm doesn't have to mean closing in, and independence doesn't have to mean disappearing. This isn't about fixing who you are. It's about understanding why you are this way, without romanticizing it or shaming it. Gen X isn't broken. It's evolved for a world that demanded emotional self-reliance, and now simply noticing that pattern changes how tightly it has to hold you. And maybe you'll notice it before life notices you. Maybe, in that quiet moment, you'll realize there's still space to choose.